Meanwhile, US banking giant Goldman Sachs says it lost more than $1 billion in December of last year. The announcement came a day after the bank reported a profit of $1.8 billion for the first quarter of this year. Due to a new accounting system, Goldman was able to place its loss into a one-off period separate to the first quarter profit. The bank received billions of dollars in government aid as part of Washington's $700 billion bank bailout. Let's get more on all this. We're joined by Bill Black, a former federal regulator and a professor of economics and law. He joins us from Kansas City, Missouri. Professor, help us understand this. I mean, it sounds all a bit dodgy here. There was a big loss in December, but Goldman Sachs is allowed to say it's made a huge profit in the first quarter of this year. What's going on?
Well, not a very huge profit, in fact, but what's going on is more accounting games. And Congress has just extorted our accounting industry to permit these games to cover up the losses of the large banks and investment banks like Goldman Sachs.
I mean, that sounds rather scandalous. Is there much of an outcry underway?
There is among sort of ordinary Americans. The president remains very popular. People wish him well, but in terms of his economic advisors, Summers and Geithner, most of the views within the financial community and regular Americans are deeply negative.
But how should we view this? First of all, I mean, Goldman is allowed then to have this interesting accounting change. It also received perhaps double taxpayers' money from the AIG bailout, and perhaps you can explain that in 20 seconds. I'm not going to try to. I mean, what is this? Is this straight crony corruption in the government right now?
Well, it is crony capitalism. It's not the government right now. The big payment, the $12.9 billion, occurred under Secretary Paulson, and that's particularly scandalous because he came from Goldman Sachs. And indeed, while he was at Goldman Sachs, he's the one that got them to invest in the toxic waste. Then Goldman Sachs is in trouble. AIG is in desperate trouble. He's now Treasury Secretary. He was Treasury Secretary under President Bush. He appoints a study group. He puts Goldman Sachs on it to tell him what he should do about AIG. And of course, they tell him he should use AIG to secretly bail out Goldman Sachs to the tune of $12.9 billion. And he does. And that money is not going to be repaid to the taxpayers.
And now Goldman Sachs is going to use, presumably, its first quarter results, which, again, are not a huge profit, but relatively good, considering the climate, to perhaps suggest it can pay back some of the money it received, the other money it received from the TARP, and therefore escape other rules. Do you think that's correct?
That's exactly what it's doing. In fact, it's going to issue new securities to the tune of about $5 billion in a way that will potentially hurt existing shareholders, which is why the U.S. stock market went down, and for the sole purpose of getting management out of the limits on executive compensation. In other words, their own pay. And it's precisely the perverse executive compensation that is the biggest single factor in why there is a worldwide economic crisis. So this is a terrible thing that will bring the next economic crisis.
It's a tangled web, perhaps by design. Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you.